I felt a little like I needed a horse and shotgun for the work I was doing. Don't get me wrong, it was nice to have the extra hands, but as I walked the line of men in orange jumpsuits, watching as they weeded and hoed and generally performed upkeep on the garden, I half expected someone to tell me they were taking it off there, boss, or drinking the water there, boss, like in an old prison movie. They didn't, and that somehow felt even stranger. The bus had rolled up right about sunset, the fluorescence sparkling off the chains they wore. They had been cuffed at the ankles and wrists, and once they were in the park, the wrist cuffs would be removed. There wasn't a ball or a daisy chain of inmates to be seen, and that threw me a little bit too. I was used to movies like Shawshank Redemption or Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, and these guys just looked like normal guys in orange jumpsuits. I don't know if I was expecting Cool Hand Luke and John Coffey to show up or something, but I was a little underwhelmed by the selection we had. Most of these guys just looked like they were happy to see the sky for a change. "Alright, listen up," said a beefy guy in a gray uniform. "You're here to work. You know that. 1930 to midnight. You are here to do whatever is needed of you. At midnight, you will shuffle back onto the bus and return to Stragview. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir," they all intoned. "If contraband should fall from the sky in front of you, you damn sure better leave it where it lies. You will be searched before you get back on the bus. You will be strip searched when you return to the prison. Anyone found with contraband will spend a month in confinement, see their gain time stripped, and will be removed from work squad. Do I make myself clear?" "Yes, sir, boss," they intoned again. Geez, it was like they practiced or something. "You will receive time and a half on your gain time form, as well as $1 an hour for your work. So don't mess around. These men behind me will be your overseers, but they will be paired with an officer to make sure you are properly watched. And gentlemen," he added, grinning wickedly, "don't stray too far from your work area. This place has a reputation for losing people, and while I would hate to fill out the paperwork for a missing inmate, I wouldn't lose any sleep over it. Right, break off. My group with me, Winkle's group with him." He turned then and offered a hand to Randy. "Sergeant Yates at your service. You head of security?" "Yeah," Randy said, trading grips with him. "Your groups will meet tonight. My second will go with Officer Winkle." Yates turned to shake my hand as well, and when a nervous-looking kid wandered up to tell Yates that the groups were ready, we set off. The groups were a little uneven, 12 and 13, and Winkle and I had the smaller one. The guys talked quietly amongst themselves, taking in the flower beds and the weird trees that seemed to bring the crowds in. But it was hard not to see the man who had run those paths a week ago. That had been something bad, something I hadn't liked being a part of, but I knew I'd do it again if called to do so. We put them to work weeding flower beds, giving particular instructions to not disturb the flowers, and they set to it. None of them had any tough guy questions or smart-ass retorts. These guys were pretty well behaved, all things considered, and I suppose that made sense. You don't bring your troublemakers out into public, and as they set to their work, Winkle leaned against a wall and made chit-chat. "So, do you and Randy work as night guards?" he asked, the smoke curling from his cigarette. "Yeah," I told him, not technically a lie, since we worked security 24/7. It's pretty dead here at night, so we usually just patrol and watch cameras. "Sounds like a sweet gig," Winkle said, exhaling smoke into the night air. "They hiring?" "I think we're fully staffed at the moment, but couldn't hurt to put an application in." He nodded, looking at the group as I watched him do a quick head count. This seemed ingrained into them, and I'd seen Yates do the same thing before setting off. Their jobs seemed to mostly consist of counting and watching, and I thought Winkle and Yates would probably do well at the garden. "So, is it true that people go missing here all the time?" He asked it carefully, like I might get offended, and when I laughed, it seemed to put him at ease. "Nah, people like to embellish. We do have people go missing, but no more than usual." He nodded, breathing out in relief. Good. I was worried I might wander off to use the bathroom and never come back again. He laughed, but I didn't share it. You should be careful if you go off by yourself. People do seem to get led astray sometimes, and people do go missing. Places like this usually have people disappear more often than usual, though. They're peaceful places where people put their mind at ease, and people sometimes forget that and wander off forever. Officer Winkle gave me an odd look, like he couldn't figure out if I was messing with him or not, but I was dead serious. We had promised not to take any of the officers, but the lady sometimes did things her own way, and the warden likely wouldn't hold a few staff against her. As I watched them go, it was hard not to think about the man who'd gone missing a week ago, the one whose job had been to disappear. The black bag had come off easily, leaving him standing by the gate in a state of confusion. When his cuffs had just fallen off, he rubbed his wrists and must have thought that God himself had set him free. He looked at the parking lot, clearly contemplating freedom, but that was when the call had come. It was subtle, like perfume on the wind, but he'd clearly heard it. If this had been a cartoon, he would have floated along the path like a lovesick skunk. But this was real life, and he had walked slowly and hesitantly towards the call of something much older and craftier than him. The cobbles had likely still been warm from the day's heat as he wound his way through the garden, and we had followed. There were 12 of us, the usual security detail, and the orders were simple. Don't get in the way, unless he somehow resists the pull of the lady. If so, stop him from escaping, by any means necessary. The lady wanted her meat breathing, but being lively was a luxury she did not require. If we had to toss his gasping body into the lily pond, then so be it. So far, it was working just fine, though the man in the orange jumpsuit kept looking around like he could see us. It unnerved me some, even though I knew we weren't making any noise. Hooves or not, we could have sprinted through a bed of dead leaves and made no sound. Randy was near me, and the look on his face made it clear that he liked this even less than I did. "'Tain't right," he whispered, too low for anyone but me to hear him. "How do we know this fella ain't innocent? Someone in the wrong place at the wrong time." "They put him on death row, Randy. Could they do that if they weren't pretty sure?" "Why not?" Randy said, a little louder than I thought was strictly wise. "They probably do it all the time. This guy could be nothing more than a patsy, and here we are getting ready to put him to death." He turned to look in our direction then, and we both shut our mouths as he walked past the poisonous fungi display and towards something new and even less savory, a monster-sized Venus flytrap. "Yeah, what about the tourists or the locals she takes? Do they deserve it?" Well, nah, but we aren't like them anymore, Randy. You told me that. We're her children, and they are meat for her table. Whatever hang-ups you have about it, you better get over it. This stops her from taking the dads who are here with their kids, the mothers looking for a day of beauty, the old folks just going for a walk, and the sons and daughters here for a relaxing time. Randy moved off then, but he seemed to accept it. I wished I'd believed a word of the crap that I had spewed, because to me, it felt pretty wrong, too. I guessed that after a couple of 100 years it would be easier, but for right now, it made me feel dirty, unclean, inhuman. We followed him as he approached the lily pond, and when the lights came on, he took a step back. The water of the pond swirled, the ripples flowing out like eels, and then she began to rise from the surface. The water never touched her, her clothes perfectly dry and lovely, and she was smiling as she spread her arms wide. "At last, you've come. Come, I'll take care of you." He splashed into the water, the cuffs of his jumpsuit saturating with pond water, but he never noticed. He was in her power, her thrall to play with, and when she drew him to her, he wrapped his arms around her like She was his long-lost love. Even from the outskirts of the grove, we could hear him weeping. He was crying like he had never seen anyone so beautiful, and as they sank into the water, he didn't even seem to notice. The lily pond swallowed them up, and when she emerged a few moments later, the lady looked far more resplendent than ever. We cheered. Despite what I knew had happened to that man, I cheered. I saw Randy cheering despite his misgivings earlier. We knew the sacrifice had been accepted, and good or bad, right or wrong, we knew it was for her, and thus it was good for us. No matter what it did for our collective soul, it was good because it served her. Know what I mean? Winkle asked, and I shook my head a little and agreed without having a clue what he was talking about. We made more small talk. We passed the night, and as midnight struck, we grouped them back up and took them back to the bus. They were muddy, they were tired, but there were still 25 of them, and that was what mattered. We waved as the buses left, knowing we would do it again Thursday, and dreading it. We knew also that the first of the month would bring in another sacrifice, and we dreaded that as well. "I'm going into town," Randy said, dropping his hands limply. "Where?" I asked him, and when he looked back, I could see the purest look of melancholy on his face. "There's a 24-hour liquor store, and I have a 10 in my boot. I'm gonna see what that'll get me, see if I can still get drunk." I watched him go, wondering if any of us had really known what service to the lady would entail. He would lead her troops into combat, he would guard her keep and train her knights, but he could not stand by and watch men who may or may not be guilty plunge into that cloudy water. As I turned and went back into the garden, I wondered how long I would be able to do it either. Good evening, everyone. It's me, Dr. Plague. I'm glad you made it to the end of the story. Thanks for stopping by. If you think you might like a little more spooky in your life, well, there should be some links popping up at the end of this to other great stories, maybe even some great playlists that you can discover. We update 7 nights a week, so there's always something new and something spooky waiting for you on the channel. If you like your spooky a little more tactile, there should be some links to Amazon down in my description, so go have a look over there. It should get you to all my latest books. Speaking of books, I've got my first horror novel, Towsy Homestead, available for purchase on Amazon. It's my first horror novel, so I'd really appreciate it if you'd go give it a look and maybe give it a buy too. If you'd like to support the channel, we have a subscription program here on YouTube, but we've also got a Patreon with lots of tiers and lots of different rewards. For example, our Spooky Skeleton contributors get their spooky 12 hours early. That's right, they get their videos at 8:30 a.m. as opposed to 8:30 p.m. Ghostly Reader tier contributors, that's a tier that's only available on Patreon, I'm afraid, get a book anytime I write one, signed and on their doorstep, hopefully in a timely manner. So, however you support the channel, whether it's monetarily or by enjoying our great videos here, thank you so much. Speaking of patrons, before we go, let's go ahead and thank them. Thanks to Sara, Unicorn Hollow, JustAmy, and Cinnamon Fox for being our spooky ghost contributors. Thanks to Shannon McGhee, Janet, Lee Kendall, Ronda J, Sue Casper, Valinar, CleoHarperReturns, Sara, and Queen Sheebah for being our spooky skeleton contributors. And thanks to Oh Snap, Winter, Xaronan, Stephanie Carrington, Tyler Parker, Grim Reaper, TomBoiTopUwU, Queen Sheebah, MissNewBooty, and Alex Connor for being our Ghostly Reader tier contributors. Thanks, everyone. We just couldn't do the show without you. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.